All right, Rob. So I was telling you before online that the first time I'd heard of Rally Road was back at Stocktoberfest East. I think it may have been like 2016, maybe 2017. I can't remember what it was. It was right after I launched my firm. And you and Josh Luber of StockX both stood out to me. Josh, because I'm a big sneakerhead, I thought, oh, that's cool. But Rally Road, the concept behind the business, I just thought was so cool. And at that time, I think it was really just cars. And been following you over Twitter over the last few years. We've engaged. I joked that, like, I don't know why you engage with me. And like, this dude's super cool. He's got a cool business. Like, what does he want to do talking to me? And I finally decided to revamp All About Your Benjamins, and I wanted you to be the first guest. So I'm excited we have this opportunity to talk about Rally Road, but also get some more insight into your history because you've got a cool backstory. So with that, Rob Petrov, so thank you for joining us. And let's get a little bit of your background before you get to Rally Road. And we have to start with good music, your time spent with Kanye West at the record label.
Yeah, so first and foremost, man, this is, I don't know why anyone engages with me either. So trust me, I'm on board the whole way, and a lot of pressure for first guests. So I appreciate it, dude. But I mean, yeah, I'll go all the way back. So like my background's always been in design, not in finance. So a lot of it was early pre-iPhone design. So this was like logos and packaging, and I got out of school with an art degree, and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. So I was trying to do like a bunch of freelance work. There were 2 or 3 really big print shops in New York that did like the work for every record label and every sort of new artist. And I was putting all my work through there. So Kanye's manager at the time, John Monopoly, saw a flyer that I had done for somebody, and he asked them who did it. And they said, Rob Petrozzo, here's his phone number. So he called me on like a Sunday in like 2004. I forget when it was exactly. And he was like, hey, what's up? I'm John. I manage Kanye West. You might have heard of him. This is right before the album came out. Like I was, yeah, of course. He's like, we're starting our own label, and we need a designer. Would you want to come in and meet everybody? And is that something you'd be interested in? I was like, yeah. I was making believe I didn't want anything to do with it. I was like, yeah, I guess so. I was like, if I have time next week. And I was like super excited. So we walk in. This is, they had just gotten a deal from Sony. So distribution deals at the time were like the biggest thing. If you got a check to do whatever you wanted with the label, that was like the biggest thing. So Kanye had a bunch of momentum. The album comes out like a week later or the week before, I forget. Sony gave him $3 million or $4 million check. And they were like, do whatever you want to do, develop artists. We want your name as the executive producer. We want your logo of Good Music, which is what the name of the company was, Getting Out Our Dreams. We want that on the back of all these CDs. And we'll give you an office in the Sony building. So we basically had this back corner of the, I think it was the 17th floor in the Sony building on Madison Avenue. And it was basically a startup. It was myself, John, Don C., who was Kanye's road manager at the time, was on the road with him. So they'd be back and forth in and out of the office. Eddie Blackman, who I forget what label he's at now, he was the president. Then like a couch with like 6 interns and like 3 designers, basically. And we would just knock out stuff all day. It was really like the first startup experience. Tech wasn't really tech yet. So it was like a bunch of logos, and I did like the all the tour merch for like John Legend's first tour. And then a bunch of like the treatments for one of Common's first videos. So the label at the time was very much a startup. After 2 or 3 years, it kind of, Sony dropped all the sub labels, and it got its new birth of like the new Good Music, which is like Pusha T and all the big names that you know now, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And that's like the second iteration of it. But yeah, that was like the first ever startup that I was at. And it was also the first time where everybody there was expected to like make money and do something somewhere else, because there wasn't a lot of money in it at all for any period of time. You know what I mean? So
started it good. Now you're at Rally Road. What was the progression to get there? And you're a co-founder of Rally Road, so you had input on this company. And for those of you who don't know Rally Road, we'll get to what it is here in a minute. I gave a little brief intro or brief description on the intro, but we'll dive further into it. But like, what was the progression, and how did Rally Road, the idea, come up?
Yeah, so I mean, that was like leaving Good was something where it was expected everybody's gonna have to find a place to go somewhere else. And myself and 2 or 3 other guys over there that were at the label, that were at BMG, that were kind of really smart developers. I was learning HTML as best I can. We started developing like these little widgets and these small websites for individual artists. And that became like the first foray into real tech. And from there, I met a bunch of people. My dad at the time was at a company that was going to be raising money for a startup called Squirrel Motion. And it was like a digital publisher. It was the idea that you bring everything that's a printed magazine and you take it and turn it into like an iPad app. This is in 2009, give or take, 2010. a little bit earlier than that actually. And he was like, I want you to meet the founder of this company. He's super smart. You know way more about tech than I do. I want to hear what your thoughts are. So I talked with the founder of that company, and it turned into like, why don't you come on board? And I wound up being like an early designer at this company that was working with Vogue and Oprah Magazine, these huge publishers. And that's kind of where I learned like really what the startup culture actually was, what technology could be, and turn what was tangible design for packages and logos and all type of stuff into digital design. So I was there for 3 or 4 years, grew the company from, I was employee number 13 or 14. We had about 250 people, East and West Coast, working with huge banks and giant pharmaceutical companies and going all over the world to sort of train agencies on how to develop content for iPad and iPhone. And that opened up more opportunities. So I wound up leaving there, worked at a couple of hedge funds here in New York, building out their internal software, same situation where, you know how it is now, where whether you're in finance or you're in, any what is considered like the old school form of business of communicating with one person to the next, you want all your software, everything you're working on to feel like a consumer product. And working at like a company like Ares Management here in New York, you have a $100 billion hedge fund, some really smart people, but they're still working in like, Excel sheets, and they're doing stuff that's a little bit bulky. So going to companies like that for a good year and a half and really understanding what their tech stack and what their front end looked like and redesigning it. And then I wound up here at a company called Kimi in New York, which was a digital locksmith, but also like a computer vision play. And it was a situation where it kind of opened the door for Rally. So it was a bunch of awesome, ridiculous engineers, robotics and AI working at like NASA and SpaceX and the smartest engineers I've ever worked with in terms of building product, but they had no product. So I went there and it was like, here's 7 of the smartest people I've ever been inside of a room with. And it's like, build the front end interface for our users, which was the ability to take a picture of your key and get it printed at any kiosk all over the country to get into your apartment or your house or your business if you're ever locked out. And then we leveraged that technology into a bunch of other stuff. So that was like the 10 years before Rally. Throughout that whole time, I was talking with my co-founder, Chris, who was a little bit older than me, but went to high school with me in Brooklyn. And we always, out of our friend group, were like the people that were the most tech empathetic and the people that understood tech the most, I think. So we've been talking about doing something together for a long time. After the Jobs Act passed and everything was kind of changing around Kickstarter and Indiegogo, the ability to sort of get non-accredited investors into a really unique investment type or into a syndicate, we knew there was a way to leverage that to the things that people really cared about. Whereas on Kickstarter, you might put some money behind something you believe in and get a t-shirt or get like a small piece of some sort of tangible thing, but you don't really have equity. And we want to sort of create a world that I think a lot of people started with, and whether it's the seed invest or the roof stocks or a few people that did like the crowdfunding for an asset, we want to create a real market around it, a real marketplace around it, and have it feel more like the same way you trade equities and the same way you would buy and sell sort of commodities. And Rally was that idea. It started with classic cars. On paper, it was just the idea that we create a stock market for classic cars. Mm-hmm. It turned into like this full marketplace for all collectibles, past, present, and future. So that was 2015. We sat down in a coffee shop and kind of sketched out what it would be. We incorporated in 2016. The first asset that we launched was a 1977 Lotus was a $77,000 IPO that we launched in 2017. And now, 3.5, 4 years later, it's this much bigger platform than I think we ever anticipated it would be.
And you got some exciting news. So in the last couple of weeks, you guys had a big fundraise and some other stuff. So started 3 or 4 years ago. What's the big news that you guys just dropped over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. So now we're from that one asset class. Now we're in 11 asset classes and hundreds of thousands of users. And we've gotten the attention of some really awesome people that have filled our cap table now. So Upfront Ventures in LA led our A round. This most recent round we just did was a follow-on where we added a little more than 17 million in new capital, which was shared amongst the existing investors, the Upfronts, the Social Leverage, Anthemis, and some of the great partners that we've had on board. And then we brought in Porsche, Jim Pelota's Raptor Group, Alexis Ohanian got involved. He's been somebody who's been super supportive of our platform, but never had money into the company. And some other strategic partners as we continue to build this marketplace out.
So first off, congratulations. That's awesome. For anybody listening or watching that this is the first time they're hearing about Rally, if you're not watching, behind Rob is an 82 Aston Martin just chilling in the lobby of the building. It's awesome. Explain what Rally Road is and how it works. It's an app I've got on my iPhone. I own 2 shares of a Mickey Mantle card and 4 shares of a Kobe Bryant card. I missed out on the Jordan shoes. I'm waiting for those to start trading again. But tell people what Rally Road is and kind of how it works.
Yeah, so I'll give you the high level. So Rally is a platform. There's a way this is like the elevator pitch, the way we describe it and the way it makes the most sense. So Rally is a platform for buying and selling stock in high value assets with a history of appreciation. So similar to the way you buy and sell any publicly traded company. Every week we run our equivalent of IPOs, which are basically SEC qualified mini companies. Each asset is its own investment. So we started with classic cars, as we talked about in 2017. Since then, we moved into watches, wine, the high-end sports memorabilia and cars that you talked about. All these asset classes with huge enthusiast groups and people who really care about it and might know a ton about this asset, but they probably, in most cases, watch the prices get away from them. And they kind of see the auction results, they'll see what's happening in the space, but don't have real equity. So each asset is its own investment. It has its own total value, its own share price, its own investors. We open that IPO in the app, fill it with investors, typically on a Friday. We maintain it, store it, insure it on behalf of those investors. Then 90 days after that IPO, after that lockup period ends, we open up bid-ask trading on our platform, all through registered broker-dealers. So we maintain a true secondary market with all those pieces as well.
You said you have 11 asset classes now. So what's like the most random asset class? We've got the cars, the collectibles. What's the one that you kind of like, people are really buying this?
So the one that, I mean, all of them are things that like, I get super excited with anything we put on our platform. And anytime something shows up in our office, whenever we have something new, especially a new asset class, we tend to sort of now it's a little bit tougher because everything's a little bit closed, but we tend to try and bring in an expert into the office and somebody who is helping us source an asset and really have our whole staff kind of understand what it is start to finish. So when we do like wine, for example, it started 7-8 months ago with a bunch of wine tastings in the office so that everybody knows, what a first growth Bordeaux actually is and what Burgundy means to wine culture. But for us, like the one that I would say was the one that took off in a way that you don't typically see and I didn't expect was with some of the historical artifacts and some of the stuff like we have an original Abe Lincoln photograph that's signed by Abe Lincoln. We have our most recent acquisition is the joystick from the Apollo 11 mission for the for the shuttle. The entire all of the manual navigation that happened for the Apollo 11 mission start to finish, where no one even knew. NASA didn't know where it was for like 20 years. That now we have on our platform that at some point we hope to give back to the Smithsonian. So there's all these assets that have this crazy historical relevance where our average investor is around 27, 28 years old. Mm-hmm. But they do value the past in a way that I think I don't want to say it was surprising because this stuff is the best of the best in a lot of cases, and it's this one-of-one type of asset. But to see, a $100,000 photo of Abe Lincoln sell out in a minute and a half with an average investor that was 27 years old, to me was a little bit more surprising than some of the sports stuff selling out quickly,
So what's the process of evaluating assets that come on the platform?
So we have an 18-point checklist that we always use that speaks to sort of a lot of the tangible aspects of an asset. And that'll be things like the rarity. If it's a car, it'll be the mileage. If it's something like a photograph, it's going to go through all those proper channels to make sure that the historical record is what the seller or what the collector says it actually is. But then we have some other stuff that we do which speaks to social relevance. So with that, the tangible aspect is also the idea that we want to make sure that all these assets are relevant to that average investor, that 30-year-old, that 40-year-old, that 20-year-old who really might not necessarily know has never seen Michael Jordan play, but they might know that Jordan 3s we know are coming out on a schedule for the next 7 or 8 months. There's 7 or 8 releases. So we know it's going to be relevant. It's going to be in conversation. So we always want to be in a situation where we're finding best quality asset, but also one that's going to be in conversation and it's going to be talked about for the next 3 to 4 years. So anytime that we have something that hits all those pieces on the checklist or the majority of that checklist, we have some of the best sort of acquirers and the best sort of collectors in the world that are working on our behalf, either as advisors or as a part of this company or as employees here, where we've got somebody who is, if we're going after a rare book or a vintage book, we typically have the person who's most likely to have access to that book, but also somebody who has, within their company or their group, the collective experience of a century's worth of sort of dealing with those types of books. So we always bring the best people in. Our checklist is matched up to the assets we think work. We'll bring those to the people that source on our behalf or to our team who's sourcing. And more often than not, we'll get 3 or 4 options that kind of fit into that mold.
Man, your Rolodex has to be awesome. And it'd probably be filled with people that no one knows, but like real power movers.
Dude, it's one of those things where like, I didn't realize how crazy I've never been like wealthy like that. I've never been in a situation where like I've had access in the one text to somebody who can get me like a $200,000 Birkin bag, you know what I mean? But now I realize that world it's liquid, but it's only liquid for a small group. And I think that's kind of what we tried to do here is open up that liquidity, not just from the buyer side, but from the seller side too. More often than not, a lot of these assets trade hands between the same 100 people, and they're all over the world. But the ability to sort of get liquidity when you need it and when you want it isn't necessarily there, even on the seller side. So that the Rolodex that I have now, a lot of it was based on commerce to start the conversations, but it has become a friendships in a place where these people are living in these worlds where their one focus might be like Pokemon cards. And that's something that I understand at a base level, but I feel like I've become an expert from dealing with these really interesting people who live in that world 24 hours a day,
So what's the selling look like? So we go in, the IPO comes, we put our shares into the car. Is there a timeline you guys have, or just kind of we're going to keep on holding it until the right option comes? Kind of what's Rally Road's responsibility when it comes to exiting at the best price for the investors?
Yeah, so we're always kind of trying to listen to what's going on in the marketplace, and if we see an opportunity to sell an asset at a significant premium, and more often what happens is that an unsolicited bid comes in to buy out all shares, and sometimes it becomes like a hostile takeover where we have to present it back to our investors. But the way it's set up right now, the secondary market, obviously there's never a guarantee that you can sell at the price you want to sell at. We try and facilitate the transactions in a way that allows for you to put that ask up at the most opportune times. But more so on the exit side, if we have something that comes in, and this happened, so we've exited 2 assets this past week. One was a Jackie Robinson car from the 50s. The other was a Saleen S7, a $350,000 car. We had unsolicited bids that came in that were at a pretty significant premium to the last price. What we'll do here is qualify that offer first. So we get offers all the time. 90% of them aren't going to pan out. But if we find a buyer who's serious, who has the money available to put in escrow and goes through all those checks and balances, that's when we bring that offer to our investors. Everybody who's invested in that asset, we'll run a survey, which is essentially like your ability to cast your vote of whether or not you think it's the right price to be selling at. If we get a majority yes, which in the last 2 that we did, it was like a 70% on the Jackie Robinson card. I think it was a 95% on the Saleen. One was a 15% markup in probably 2 months. The other was a 25% in around 6 months. We'll bring that vote back to our third-party advisory board. They'll give it the full sort of, yes, the market, the way we see this marketplace right now, and they're usually experts in the field, the way we see this marketplace is an opportune time to sell. The money's already in escrow. The investors have said yes, and then we'll facilitate that transaction, get everybody paid out. So we typically look at everything we buy at like a 3 to 5 year period. We try and make sure there's enough activity in the space to support that asset for 3 to 5 years in terms of conversation, in terms of auction results. But we really try and make sure that the investors in each asset are a part of process start to finish. And that comes from sourcing assets. If everybody's saying go get Kobe and we feel like it hits that checklist, there's no reason we won't go get Kobe. If everybody's saying sell Kobe, now's the right time, then we'll also take the Kobe assets on our platform. We'll find that buyer for them.
Cool. That's a cool process. I like the fact that the shareholders get a say, get the vote in it, which makes sense. But I don't know the legality behind the structure of the way it's set up, if they have to have it or if you guys are just smart and let them be a part of the process. I
mean, so the way it's set up, like to run the true proxy vote for, a $100,000 asset with 400 people, it wouldn't be cost efficient for anybody, for us or for them. So a 20% gain would turn into 0 if we had to run the true proxy vote. But we transparency, I think, and I've tried to do this myself, and so many of our investors have like my cell phone number, and like I'll talk to everybody, I'll talk to anybody. You know what I mean? Anybody that wants to talk about Rally, I'll always talk to. But we've tried to instill that in our whole team here, where if you're doing things behind closed doors, part of what I think the problem with traditional finance has been is that it's been like, all right, awesome, I had a conversation with you, but now the smartest people will go talk in this back room and we'll tell you what the outcome is. We try to avoid that as best we possibly can with this platform, and doing something where sometimes we're wrong. Like there are times we're wrong about picking an asset. I'll be the first person to talk about it on Twitter and say like we made a mistake on this one, but we're gonna figure out the next one. That type of stuff I think is way more important than just trying to always have the front up like we know what's best for you. We don't ever want to be in that situation.
Well, just from I think from a community standpoint, because ultimately you're building a community of your fans, the fact that they get to participate in it, like it's not just an investment. It's, they have some ownership in it because they'll get to vote whether or not it's going to go in. Like, I think that's smart. And I also think going back to your average age, I'm a little bit older than that, but the average age of your investor their wants for transparency, their wants for companies that do good and are good people is high, versus you look at traditional finance. That's not the case. It's always been what you described, and it's always been shady. And the reason that financial advisors like myself have to always fight an uphill battle is because finance for so long hasn't been transparent. It hasn't been for the end investor, but putting that relationship out there, I think, is smart. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it obviously resonates with your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, but you know how it is too. It's like, even for you, when it comes to referrals or the people that you work with, if you're an advisor or you're somebody who's trying to sell anything, word of mouth is always going to be the biggest driver in my mind. And that's something that, like, the trust stamp is impossible to get from a YouTube ad or from, forcing something down into somebody's portfolio. So word of mouth for us has always been the biggest driver for new investors in particular. And we've never had like a true marketing function at Rally, but we do our best to put out like interesting content and tell the story of each asset. But more so, we do our best to make sure that the stuff we're thinking gets out to the public, and we try and build that community as best we can, because there's no way to quantify saying like, all right, being more active in the conversation with your investors is going to help, it's going to take your cost of acquisition down, or it's going to bring your returns up, or any that type of stuff. But there is this long tail feel that we have as a company where transparency and telling the full truth is what's helped us and what will continue to help us. We always want to be able to do that and be able to generate that positive word of mouth.
I want to get to the long tail, the future of Rally Road, but I want to also ask you about, I think it's pretty cool, on some of the offerings, you've had like little giveaways that go with it. Like I think with the Mario game, you had like a little coin or something.
Yeah. So
Did I see that?
We're always the one thing that, and the reason that we have this store in Soho, like I'm sitting in our store right now, which is on Lafayette Street in the middle of Spring and Prince, which is not typically where you see like a bank. There's not a single bank between us and like Houston up one way and Canal the other way. So you have like 6 blocks where there's no finance. It's only like really expensive restaurants, and it's like this mix of like Supreme is 1 block north and like 1 block south is like StockX is right on our corner. So it's really this hub of commerce more than anything else. And of consumer, I should say. We've always looked at ourselves as like a consumer product. It's got the finance element, but it works hand in hand. So we've always wanted to make sure there are items or objects or tangible pieces that bring this to life. This store is part of that, being able to come in and see some of the assets you invest in. Hopefully we'll be opening soon. And then the tangible pieces you could bring with you, whether it's part of a giveaway. And like for the Mario, we did the Mario offering you're talking about it's the highest graded Mario that's been available on the market. It's the most expensive original Mario Brothers game, $150,000, completely sealed game, graded 9.8, I believe, 9.6, I believe. But we wanted to make sure that's something that for me, mid-30s, you look back and you're thinking like, man, that was an awesome moment in time. Like I would love to have a piece of that and understand how it all works. So like we gave away Nintendo on Twitter, the original pack with all the games, like a whole setup that you could hook up to any TV. And that was like a big draw of attention, a big draw of word of mouth. But then at checkout, we minted these big like 4-inch coins that were like literally looked and felt like the coin Mario when he hit the question box would pop up. Yeah. And it was like a limited numbered stock certificate that came with it. So part of like the way we developed this platform is thinking about when I was younger. I think my grandma or somebody gave me this 1 share of like Disney. It was on the piece of paper. That thing was like, I remember, I don't know where it is now, and I wish I did. It was like a really important thing for me as like an 11-year-old, like holding on to that, even though I didn't know what it meant. Doing something tangible where you get that like stock certificate for us has always been really important. And it's been something that people gravitate towards. So now we've led that into like a whole line of merch that's associated with a lot of these assets. And that's become like a big driver of conversation and word of mouth for the business as well.
Smart. I love it. So the future, I want to go two directions. One, the future of Rally, like how many asset classes do you guys want to get? What's the mission? Like what is your ultimate goal? And then we'll stop there. I want to get that first.
Yeah, so I think I know where you're going with the next question. This kind of leads into it perfectly. So the future of Rally, I don't think is that different than the future of finance and fintech in general. But where we want to go as a business, the next big thing for us is intangible assets. So like music is a big thing for us, and whether that's rights or it's going to be based around an artist, we're still working out right now. And that's something that like from me, that's where I came from and where a lot of people at this company kind of gravitate towards. That's a big thing for us. But also the idea that, I really do feel like, and we feel like as a company, you should be able to invest in anything you care about. You should be able to put your money where your mouth is. So we saw in, 2016, 2017, I was telling my grandma to buy Bitcoin like everybody else was. And I think it's something where it was kind of hard for her to understand it. but she understands like why Abe Lincoln's important. You know what I mean? So making those sort of going across all asset classes, going across all generations, going across all interest groups is important. There's things that I don't know about right now where you might be walking down the street and see something that somebody has, be like, that was a great investment 10 years ago. That was worth $1,000. Now it's worth $10,000. I don't know that, but I don't want to be in a position that it's always stuff that we pick. There should be a world where if you know something's important, you should be able to have true equity in it. We want to make sure that everything, whether that's music rights or a piece of a redwood forest or it's a baseball card, you have access to. So for us, Rally is about bringing a lot of people together and investing in things we care about. That doesn't just mean the things that everybody knows are important. It means that niche group that you have that could be a full syndicate investing in something I know nothing about and I might not see the value in, but you do, that should be on Rally. So really holding the hands of both the supply on that side and bringing those investors into our platform for anything tangible or intangible that holds value is what the future of this platform looks like.
So opening it up a little bit more to the investor to say, hey, Rally, we've got X amount of people with X amount of dollars. Go get this for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of like the programs we're putting together now are working directly with the suppliers too. So like we worked with Topps to put together a Series 1 set that no one knew was coming out, where there's 12 cases, 2 of which stayed with them, 10 of which came to us and went straight to our investors. And that's one that now only exists on Rally. So stuff like that for us is the way I think that we sort of open up a world of investing with people who might just have a hobby or might think about it as something that's interesting but not an investment. And working directly with those museums, with those suppliers, and being able to sort of open up the story of the asset to our investors is kind of a lot of what we're thinking about for 2020 and 2021.
That's awesome. So then before long, you're going to have like a one-of-one Rally Road Nike or something.
I mean, that's part of like that for me is like a personal goal. You know what I mean? Like right. I got out of when I was in Good Music, I got out and I was doing a bunch of freelance design again. And I was talking to Converse about doing a sneaker, and it was like the greatest month of my life. It never came out. It was part of this artist series that never came out. But like all I want to do is make a sneaker. That's all I'm trying to do. So at some point, hopefully you will be able to wear the Rally Nike. And it will be awesome. Way better than the Slack Cole Haan, I promise.
Oh yeah, I saw those yesterday. That's ridiculous.
Yo, more power to them, man. If people want them, like by all means, who am I to say it's wrong?
I've got to imagine the only people who would want those are people who work at Slack. Like, why else would you?
I don't know, man.
It's like, I don't realize they had that much of a following. Like, I think about like brands and stuff.
I didn't either. I mean, you look at their numbers and you realize, like, man, if they tapped 1% of their user base right now, like they would be blowing the doors off. So who am I to say? Like, there's a lot of things I got wrong over the years that I didn't think were going to be a thing. Like, I didn't think for a second Dior Jordans were going to matter. I knew they were going to be expensive, but I thought that bubble was going to pop immediately. But I guess people do want them. I don't know.
Yeah. So piggybacking on the future, we as financial advisors, global, we believe in diversification, stocks, bonds, alternative assets are always a talking point, but really there's not a lot of great alternative investments that don't move at the same rate that the stock market does. We want to get away from the market, but still have appreciation, which historically cars, collectibles have moved on their own. Mm-hmm. Being able as a 38-year-old without millions of dollars to be able to buy into some of these, in theory, I could take a chunk of my portfolio and diversify out through a Rally Road into a bunch of different collectibles and things that don't move to the market. Is that where you would like to see Rally end up one day? Or do you kind of want Rally to be – gimmick is not the right word. That's disrespectful. I don't mean that in any way, but kind of like a fun thing. Like, yeah. And like I said, that's the word that comes to mind. I don't mean that. I think it more of Rally being a cool investment. It's something people talk about. It's a good introduction to investing, but it doesn't have its spot on my asset allocation chart for my clients.
Yeah.
Right now. Is that where you guys would love to see it one day?
So that's the perfect setup. I think that we've always looked at alternative assets as a real investment class. I think the people that are in the know do too. It might not be baseball cards. The more often than not, it's real estate. It's like, even for a kid, like they don't know what treasuries are, you know what I mean? But the yield isn't necessarily interesting to an 18-year-old. We tell them, 3.5%. You know what I mean? It's not going to be interesting, or 8% yield on some loan product or whatever it is. This is super interesting. And that was always our entry lane. But what we've seen is that 28, 29, 30-year-old who comes into our platform, they're kind of like the matured, I don't want to talk down on any platform, but it's almost like you graduate from Robinhood. I think a lot of people wind up on Rally. But the bigger one that we've seen is that people come in because it's cool. They get drawn in by like a pair of Jordans, and they're using discretionary money to invest. So they're taking what would have been, a a really nice dinner or like a pair of Jordans, and they're putting that money or splitting that money on Rally. So we've unlocked this liquidity in a way that it's not just people taking money out of their allocation. They're taking it out of new cash that they would have spent. They're making an investment. And that's what became really interesting to us, that a lot of those kids on our platform, and I say kids because I'm an old man relative to them, the same age as you basically, but I look at what they're doing and they're so much more savvy than I was when I was 23 or 24 years old. And I got killed in 08, 09. Like that's when I first learned what options were, and it murdered me. These kids now though, like they're expert options traders too. They're running crazy long short strategies and selling covered calls and like stuff that I would have never in a million years thought to do. And they learn it quick. And that's because the access to information is so prevalent. So we're just trying to educate as many people as we can about what these assets are, what the story is. And we're finding that they're getting to our platform because that story is interesting, but they're turning into an actual investment thesis. And they're taking what would have been money they might have thrown at Apple or another company, and they're saying, like, I'd rather throw that at game-worn Jordan from 1988. And they're seeing some returns now, too. So the more we can keep building that, I think where we want to get to is, and I've been saying this analogy a lot, but really the way I see it is that, you know, what Robinhood is to your equities and what Coinbase is to your crypto, Rally should be to everything else, so all your alternatives. And we think those can live complementary to one another without having to take away from the allocation you give to equities or the allocation you give to crypto. We think there's a new world that's opening up now where people realize the value of true equity. And that's kind of where we want to get to say, granted, we don't know what the allocation should be. Typically, people say like 5% to alternative assets or whatever it is. But, you know, 10 years ago, no one thought you were allocating any money to crypto either. And now it's in a situation that those things live in sort of harmony together, equities and crypto. We think alternative assets should be there as well.
Well, from a practitioner standpoint, I think it would be pretty cool to be able to incorporate this in the right portfolio for the right client. Like, it's not going to be for everybody. The trouble and the hurdle Rally will have to overcome, at least if they want to penetrate the advisor market and get some support from us advisors, is the speaking to our planning software. Like, that's crypto's big problem right now. Exactly. Like, they, you know, eventually they'll probably get the ETF. They've got the trust right now, but that trades at a premium. And you know, really the best way to own crypto, if we go Bitcoin, is to buy the Bitcoin itself. But as a financial advisor, I can't do that for my clients, and I can't store their keys for them. And there's this hurdle. And I know there's some stuff coming down the road it's going to address that. But I think that's the same hurdle you'll have, is if you get an advisor that sees, okay, you know, in a recession, you know, collectible cars, expensive wines, like those things still move because most of the people dealing in that aren't affected by the recession. Like they're recession proof. Yeah. So, and we saw that in 2008. We've seen that right now, like the separation of class. So here's our way as an advisor to get our clients into this new asset class that is recession proof for a lot of the time. And we can do that, but it's got to speak to our planning software so we can incorporate that.
No,
so
and that's
put that on your radar for the future.
Yeah, no, but we had those same conversations. We talk about where we are now, and like we're friendly with, and we talk to like Jan Van Eck, who's just so ahead of it in terms of like the ETFs and has massive gold ETF, but also a Bitcoin ETF, and some really, really smart people there who get what that space looks like. And then we talk to like the Howard Lindsons of the world too, who really understand equities in a way where like see around the corners on what liquidity is going to do and what the supply chain looks like. For us, like we're focused on getting the AUM where it needs to be, but also the volume where it needs to be. So we have that longer trajectory and longer history of returns and kind of can match it up to the benchmarks. We're not there yet. I'll be the first to say, like, we're not at a point that like we're blowing the doors off on institutional investing, or we're going to investment advisors and saying like, here's A, B, and C, here's our buckets, here's our ETF, here's how we're going to do it. We just feel like it's something that's becoming way more conversational now. Mm-hmm. And we do feel like the technology curve kind of helps us. So, you know, realistically, 5 years ago, nobody was talking about crypto. Nobody would have thought an ETF was even possible. And now we're at a point that it's so far gone from that like the new, I don't know what that is in like NFTs and a bunch of like the tokenization stuff, where that's taken the place of what was the ambiguity around crypto, I feel like a little bit. For us, we're still in that kind of I'm not so sure ambiguous type of phase for most people. Why would I invest in a baseball card? Why would I invest in a car? So all we're focused on for the time being is getting that AUM to a point that we have a really robust market that goes across a bunch of asset classes and the volume to support it, but educating people on what an actual alternative asset is to the best of our abilities while staying within the regulatory construct of not selling securities. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You need to get Gary Vee to come in and do a collab with you guys, and all of his big card collecting audience will just swarm to it.
Yeah, no, he's a good, and we've had the conversation a little bit. We don't know like what it looks like, but he like the fact that so many people outside of finance and outside of the hobby and collecting have gotten into like card collecting right now. I think it speaks to the fact that the education side is there if you can push it a little bit. Everybody remembers and has these crazy nostalgic moments, especially like guys our age, about like video games when they were younger and baseball cards when they were younger, and like the first car they saw in the 80s that was like the aha moment. All that type of stuff exists. So the story is like the most important tenet for us, turning it into an actual financial instrument. And now as we sort of the money that we just raised, part of that is building out this world-class secondary market and making sure all those derivative products and all the things that people expect from a trading interface are part of our platform as well. So it's educating people on those assets, which is starting to happen more outside of our platform now, and educating them on how Rally actually works, so we can get to the point that you go into your Robinhood account and your classic cars are sitting right next to your Amazon and Tesla stock. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. Well, as you think about, like, you have a backstage look at what's coming down the road when it comes to technology, because you're in it for Rally, but I'm sure you're friends with everybody else building all the cool stuff. Like, without, like, not the companies, but what are future opportunities you either see through Rally or through other similar companies being built right now that excite you?
I think the supply is super exciting right now for us. Like we get nonstop. We're getting like, here, look at this awesome thing. Do you want to buy it? Type of stuff. And some of it's wacky and it's like, some of it's awesome. It's like stuff from the Titanic and dinosaur bones and crazy stuff that I'll never get access to if I didn't have this business. But that's happening too. In that you would have seen like the Seed Invest of the world and some of the real estate plays. A lot of times the stuff that made it to platforms that allowed you to invest was whatever was left over, because the people with the money and with the access would take up the best possible, literally the real estate or the best venture deals. What we're seeing now, though, I think, and it was really exciting to me, is that move towards independence, where somebody who owns an asset or somebody who has the supply doesn't necessarily need to go the traditional routes to get it to the best possible investor and the people that care about it most, is the most interesting thing to me. So you see that in VC with a lot of the micro funds now, it's like the thing that everyone loves to talk about. But there are like deals that I'm in with small checks that I would have never had access to 2 or 3 years ago, ever. No matter who I was or what position I was in tech, it would have been really hard to not have a fund lead and pick who those follow-on investors actually were. And that is not the case anymore. It's starting to change a little bit. Same thing with the really interesting financial products, access to commodities and access to sort of investment types that aren't just pure long equity, which when I was 23 years old, the only option was go on my TD Ameritrade account, apply for options trading, and get access to just buying calls and buying puts. So the ability for sort of what's changed over the last 5 or 6 years, especially as now the SEC is changing what accreditation actually is that they're saying a regular person can understand risk enough to make some investments that weren't available to anybody except the ultra rich 5 years ago. And you have the supply side saying, we want those people to be a part of this, because they're almost as, if not more important than the gatekeepers. You know what I mean?
So you've had a successful career navigating your way to where you are today. One of my focuses for season 2 of All About Your Benjamins is more on entrepreneurship. Now, I've, over the last couple of years, I didn't grow up an entrepreneur, but I've found this love of entrepreneurship. So I want to get some advice or kind of some observations of your career. So when you think of other founders and creative people like yourself out there, what would you tell them is important to consider as they try to build the companies of the future?
I mean, there's a couple of things, like relationships, super important. So going back to like early days and like walking into that Sony building, and I think it was the second time Kanye was in the building, the second time I had seen him, I was wearing this jacket. Like everybody wanted to dress there. Everyone wanted to like wear the coolest clothes and make sure that if Kanye was there, he saw you and like pointed out that you were wearing something cool. And I was wearing this white Franklin and Marshall jacket that I bought from some website. I knew it was like important, and I wore it in, and he just asked me where I got. He's like, "Where'd you get that from?" And I told him, and I was like, "That's it. Now every day I got to impress." So from that point forward, I was spending every dollar on clothing. But that became like part of the relationship of being there, and a lot of people, like, there's weird ways to, I don't want to say get respect from the people around you, but like I was at a point then I was saying yes to everything, and I was always trying to impress to a degree that it wouldn't affect my work, but it was something where you make the people around you comfortable. And I've always tried to do that, I think. And that's the thing that gets lost now, because so much of communication is digital, and so much of what people do is like head down, just put the work in. But everything is sales. Like that's the thing that I think gets lost a lot now, and that a lot of the younger kids that we bring into this company now, I want to make sure I always instill in them that, like, no matter what we're doing, whether it's internal, external, it's all part of a sale. And I think that being able to sell is this, like, I'm not the CEO of this company, I'm the co-founder and the CPO. But from a CEO perspective, and anyone that talks to investors, talks to people in the office, talks to people on the street here in New York, it's always a sale. It's not inauthentic. It should always be authentic. But the ability to sell and learning how to sell is something that doesn't get taught in school, that you only learn by, like, hitting the floor a couple of times. And being able to sort of sell yourself and sell your product is such a huge, huge benefit for everybody who's starting now.
And I would just piggyback on that. I think it's easier to sell yourself and your product when you're doing something you're passionate about. So I think that you kind of go in the direction of something that calls you and that you're excited about. And then it's a lot easier because honestly, if at that point, it's not selling. You're just telling a story that you believe in.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel like, because me personally, I don't like to be sold, and I don't like to feel like I have to sell somebody. You know, either I want what you have and I already know that, and I'm buying from you because of the relationship, or I like what you're about, or I'm so passionate about this that this is what I believe, this is how I am. And like, I'm just going to tell you that it's not going to be a sale. So I think that we are always selling, and we're always selling ourselves. But when you're where you're supposed to be or something you're passionate about, it becomes a lot easier because now you're just telling a story. It's not really a sale.
Yeah, you said it way better than me. Like, I'm saying it wrong because it's got to be.
No, you said it right. I just added to it.
It's got to be real. But you're right. Like when you're, it's that old adage where, like, find what you love to do, you'll never work a day in your life thing. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of that, but it's more like, you know, everybody's gotten really spoiled now, myself included, because you don't have to show up to get a deal done anymore. You know what I mean? Like, there was a time when I was 22, 23 years old, like, the idea of, like, the super hustle and sleeping only 4 hours, I was completely into it because I thought that was the only way, but I loved what I was doing enough that I didn't need sleep. And now if I don't get 8 hours, I'm like a zombie. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that, like, being authentic and being around, like, being in the right rooms, you should want to be, in my opinion, around the people who you feel like can help you. And it's okay to, like, to it's not using the relationship to be, like, really happy and excited and be able to talk about what you want to do with those people or in those environments, because more often than not, if you don't ask for it, they're not gonna give it to you anyway. So if you're around the right people, and even if you see somebody you feel like you want to have a conversation with, sculpting that conversation into selling yourself or selling your product and the thing you really believe about, people want to hear that still. They don't want to just get the deck in the email and have the conversation later. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. All right, 2 final questions. I'll let you get back to your day. The first one is kind of just like a fun one. What's your favorite offering that's been on Rally Road?
So it didn't happen yet. So it'll come out at some point in the next few months. We bought the floor from Kobe's last game at the Staples Center. That's signed by him and from the 60-point game. So it's like that we don't have yet, but I want to do something with that where it's like put under glass or something and actually have it be a part of our office. I'm not sure what we're going to do with it yet, but that was like the thing that I really wanted that we got. The one we missed out on that I'm pissed about was the crown was Big E's crown that he wore in the photo shoot from 25 years ago, whatever that was. So we had to bid on that at auction, which we typically don't do unless we have to. But that was one that I felt like, for me, like, you know, 30s from Brooklyn, there's no way that that's such a very specific moment. Mm-hmm. And it's something that everybody recognizes. To have that would have been a really, really big one. I hope it goes somewhere where, like, it can do something for charity or something. We have this whole marketing plan around it. We're going to give it back to the family, all sorts of stuff. But those are the two, that one that we have, one that we don't, that were like the oh shit moments for me a little bit.
That's awesome. All right. So the final question, this is going to be the question everybody gets season 2. And you alluded to a little bit, but hopefully there's another one, but I want to know what your superpower is. And what I mean by that is, like, what's the characteristic or the trait about yourself that has allowed you to build Rally Road and reach your goals that separates you from other people?
Yeah, I mean, part of it we did talk about, where it's like, I really do. I don't have any superpowers. I have luck is my superpower. I've been really lucky to be around a lot of the right people and just work hard. But I do like being in uncomfortable situations. Like, I don't like being in a situation where, like, I feel like I'm just sitting on a couch hanging out around a bunch of people that I know and already recognize and already have the conversation with. So, like, I preach that to anybody who's starting, anyone that, like, I work with, or, like, I advise a couple of companies and have a couple of kids to work with who are just coming out of school. And the idea is that, like, I've never cared about what people with money think about me a little bit. I like being around them and being in a situation where I'm the least, and where they look at me as the least important person in the room. Like, that's my favorite thing to do. My girlfriend makes fun of me all the time. I love going to, like, nice restaurants and be dressed like in sweatpants type of deal, just to see what happens. Like, if I'm comfortable, I'm cool with it. I like being in the uncomfortable situation. But the other side of that, which is similar, is that I think a lot of us here at Rally, I think about this as a company too. The real superpower is I personally tend to get things right the second time, but I'm kind of okay with messing it up the first time. Like there's been very few situations here where we got it right out of the gate. We got the product right a little bit, but also we've been lucky in that nobody here got beat down when something didn't work the first time. And me personally, as a designer, it's super rare that you give something to a client and whether it's internal or external or a user, end user, whatever it is. And the first time they're like, that's exactly what I was looking for. It just never, ever happened. So getting used to the idea that it's iterative and that nothing's going to be right the first time is something that I've gotten really, really comfortable with. And I preface meetings with that now. Like I'm going through with the team, like a big redesign of a bunch of different features inside the app at like 4 or 5 o'clock today, like our whole executive team. They're going to shred me. Like they're going to hate this first design. Mm-hmm. I want that to happen because if I got it right the first time, that means there's not enough people in the room who care about what we're working on. So the ability to sort of know there's a really good chance you can get something wrong the first time, be able to follow up and get it right, listen to what everybody's saying, take that feedback and go back to the drawing board with a clear head is kind of my actual superpower if I had to get one.
That's totally a superpower because that fear and that strive for perfection right out the gate is what keeps so many great people from, pushing record or writing something out or hitting publish. Like that's a superpower because a lot of people struggle with that. So
it's like,
awesome.
It's like you can say what you want, but like Elon Musk has not achieved what he wants yet. He's done 6 companies because he wants to go live on Mars. You know what I mean? Like he's messing it up every time right now until he gets to the point that there's enough cash, enough steam, and all the powers that be are like, all right, we can do this now, hit the button and go to Mars. You know what I mean? Like there's never a situation where you're right the first time. So rare. I
think that's a great ending note. So Rob, let everybody know where they can follow you, follow Rally Road, all that stuff.
Yeah, so Rally is at Rally on Instagram, on RallyRD on Twitter, and me personally is Rob Petrozo on every platform. But rallyrd.com, rallyroad.com is the place where you can find everything about what we're working on right now.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to talk Rally and talk entrepreneurship with me. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to since we set it up. Thankful for Twitter for allowing this connection to come, and I'm definitely swinging by next time I come to New York City. I usually make a fall trip, and I don't think it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's the best time to be here, too. Just right now, it's not the best time to be here, but at some point soon, come through, man. I really do appreciate it.
Definitely will. All right, Rob, I appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe, like, all that fun stuff, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, man.